Why, hello there. I am Fox, and I will be reading to you 11 real-life horror stories that will make your skin crawl. I will read one horror story every single day until I read all of them. The first story we're going to read is about Alexander the Great. Most likely you know who that is. A mighty Macedonian who has conquered a lot of territory in his time. But he was poisoned and his life was cut short at the age of 32. However, there were suggestions that he's not dead. When Alexander the Great's body failed to decompose 6 days after his death, the ancient Greeks were in awe. His loyal followers believed this was clear confirmation he was a god. But modern scientists have since posited otherwise. In fact, according to one theory, the ancient king's body didn't decompose because he wasn't actually dead yet. Ooh. Alexander the Great may have been the most famous person in history to be buried alive. According to Plutarch, an ancient Greek historian who wrote his parallel lives hundreds of years after Alexander's reign, using many secondary sources, the Macedonian conqueror died in 323 BC. After a 24-hour drinking spree, he came down with a fever and felt a sudden pain in his back as though smitten with a spear. Pretty soon he was paralyzed, and soon after that, he was rendered speechless. Eventually, 32-year-old Alexander was pronounced dead. His cause of death, however, has remained a mystery for millennia, but one doctor recently thought she cracked it. In February 2019, Dr. Catherine Hall of the University of Otago in New Zealand posited in the Ancient History Bulletin that Alexander suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. According to history, the rare autoimmune disorder can lead to fever, abdominal pain, and paralysis, which to Hall seems to exactly fit Plutarch's account of Alexander's death. The combination of ascending paralysis with normal mental ability is very rare, and I have only seen it with GBS, said Hall. She suggested that Alexander contracted the rare disorder from Campylobacter pylori infection, the most frequent cause for GBS worldwide. My apologies for making mistakes. I did not make this story up. I'm reading this off the internet. Back in the 4th century BC, doctors didn't use a patient's pulse to diagnose death. They used breath. And since Alexander was paralyzed, his body required less oxygen and his breathing was kept to a minimum. Thus, with his pupils dilated and apparent lack of response to stimuli, doctors assumed he was dead when his mental faculties were completely intact. How things Alexander was pronounced dead a full 6 days before he actually died. That explains why Plutarch described his body as remaining pure and fresh for days. It also means that Alexander was buried alive. Some scholars dispute Hall's explanation. For one, her source material was written more than 400 years after the death in question, and it's nearly impossible to properly diagnose someone without examining their remains. And Alexander's burial site has never been found. But even still, Hall's is a freaky theory. I wanted to stimulate new debate and discussion, and possibly rewrite the history books by arguing Alexander's real death was 6 days later than previously accepted, Hall said. The enduring mystery of his cause of death continues to attract both public and scholastic interest, she said. The elegance of GBS diagnosis for the cause of his death is that it explains so many otherwise diverse elements and renders them into a coherent whole. It's a tidy diagnosis, but it means that Alexander the Great, the bright military mind who conquered half the planet, may very well have witnessed his own funeral.